I live about 20 miles outside the city in a quiet rural area. My home sits just off a highway, and there's a 24/7 gas station on the corner, a place that's always there when I need to grab a late-night snack or something quick. I tend to go there often, especially when I get a craving for Cajun peanuts, like I did one Saturday night last week. It was right before midnight, and the road was eerily quiet. Just one car parked on the side, which wasn't unusual. The gas station was usually dead at this time of night, with maybe a guy working behind the counter, but that's it. When I walked in, it was off. The store was completely silent, not a soul behind the counter. I assumed the worker might have stepped away, maybe in the back or the bathroom, but even though the door chimed when I walked in, there was no response. I stood there for a moment, feeling a strange unease creeping up my spine. I called out, "Anyone here?" No response. I waited. The seconds stretching into what felt like minutes. The uncomfortable silence was becoming unbearable. Finally, I set the peanuts down on the counter, unsure what was happening, and stepped outside. I glanced around. The car parked out front didn't seem unusual, and I checked the side and back of the store. There was nobody. The lot was empty. My unease grew. So, I did something I never thought I would. I called the police. The officers arrived in about 10 to 15 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. They searched the store. It felt like they were in there forever, even though they'd just started. And then, they found him. The cashier. He'd been beaten to death in the men's bathroom. My stomach sank, and my mind was racing as I tried to process what was going on. The police asked me to recount everything. I told them what I had seen, how no one was there, how I felt uncomfortable, and how I'd checked around the store and left. They took down my details, and then, as I headed home, I thought it was finally over. But it wasn't. When I arrived home, the feeling of dread washed over me again. My dog, who's an inside dog, was out front, peeing on the lawn, staring at me. I thought it was weird, but I brushed it off. That is, until I noticed the front door was cracked open. My heart jumped into my throat. I rushed inside, grabbed my dog, and headed back to the gas station to inform the police. They sent an officer to check my house. He didn't find anything stolen, nothing appeared out of place, but there were signs of forced entry. Someone had broken into my house. The blood drained from my face. I couldn't shake the thought. Was the person who killed that cashier in my house? That was last week. And just a few hours ago, I got a call from my brother. He works for the county sheriff's office, and he had some chilling news. The gas station had security cameras, and they'd pulled the footage. The timeline matched up. According to the footage, about 10 minutes before I walked in, someone had entered the gas station. The man started beating the cashier, punching him relentlessly before dragging him into the bathroom. After that, the footage showed me walking in, calling out, and walking back out, just like I had done. But here's where things get strange. The camera showed the murderer walking out of the bathroom shortly after I left. He snuck out the back door, and before disappearing from the camera's view, he headed in the direction of my house. My blood ran cold. That man, whoever he was, had been so close. He was on the same path, likely right by my house. I got off the phone with my brother, my mind racing. I couldn't help but wonder, had I crossed paths with a murderer and not even known it? Had I missed him at the gas station by mere seconds? The thought made me sick to my stomach. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Thankfully, my wife was out that night, watching Beauty and the Beast with some friends, so she wasn't home when it happened. But that didn't make me feel any better. I knew, deep down, that whoever did this was still out there, somewhere. To be safe, I had a new security system installed at my house, along with a new front door. But even then, I can't shake the feeling that whoever broke in might be lurking nearby. Maybe it was just a coincidence that he chose my house. It was close, and there were no other cars around, making it a convenient opportunity. Or maybe it wasn't. It doesn't make sense. Why would someone commit such a crime and then come so close to my home? The more I think about it, the more questions I have. And now, even though the police are still looking into the case, I can't help but feel like I'm being watched. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow in the corner of my eye, it all feels like a warning. Whoever did this is still out there, and I don't know if they're planning to come back. It was a little after 1 a.m. when I finally left my friend's house. We'd just finished a movie marathon, and I was tired but content. The drive home was a long one, especially at that hour, through the winding roads and dark, desolate stretches of highway. I wasn't exactly in the most comforting place, driving through the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night, but it was only about an hour until I would be home. Still, as a teenage girl weighing only 110 pounds, I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. I'd had my fair share of creepy encounters at gas stations, and the last thing I wanted was to stop in some isolated place, especially at this hour. It was just after the halfway point on my journey when the dreaded gas light came on, flashing in my dashboard. I cursed under my breath, knowing I would have to stop soon. The next gas station I saw was well lit and seemed to be in a pretty open area. I drove up to the pump and started to park. I looked around, checking my mirrors, just to be sure no one was lurking in the dark. I'd learned by now to trust my instincts, especially when it came to safety. It was a good thing I did. I stepped out of my car, keeping a watchful eye around me. The gas station was quiet, almost too quiet for my liking. As I started to pump the gas, I heard the faint sound of a cigarette being lit. I turned slightly and saw a guy standing outside the station, smoking and watching me. He seemed like a normal enough guy at first, nothing outwardly alarming. But then the pump started to malfunction, clicking off repeatedly no matter how I tried to adjust it. It wasn't pumping, and I was getting frustrated. That's when I saw him. He was still standing there, watching me closely, a slight smile creeping across his face. At first, I thought maybe he was just laughing at the ridiculousness of a teenage girl struggling with a gas pump. But then I realized he was watching me way too intently, and that made my skin crawl. After I managed to get maybe a quarter of a gallon, I gave up on that pump and moved to another one. That's when things started to get real. When I got back into my car, I immediately locked the doors. I don't know why, but the instinct was there. I checked my mirrors, the rear view, side mirrors, every direction. I had an old 90s Beetle, and it didn't always start immediately. So, I knew I had to be extra careful. That's when I saw him. He was walking toward me. That same guy, smiling, slowly approaching the driver's side window. Now, most people would have rolled down their window to talk, but I wasn't going to let this guy get any closer than he already was. So, I rolled down the passenger window instead. He stopped in his tracks, looking a little confused, but then he smiled again and walked around to the other side, leaning in through the passenger window. "Hey," he said, almost too casually. "I know this seems really weird, but I promise I'm not a creep or anything. My car broke down." He pointed to a red SUV parked a few pumps down, "and I need a ride home. It's just half a mile up the road." I didn't even hesitate. "Sorry, but I don't know you." "Oh no, I totally get it," he said, chuckling softly. "I thought it was pretty weird when I was walking up here, too. But it's only half a mile. I'm totally stranded." I stared at him, my heart racing. He was still smiling, but the look in his eyes was starting to shift. "I wish I could help you, but I really don't know you," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded slowly, his expression darkening. "Yeah, I got you. If you had a truck or something, I'd offered a ride in the back," he said, glancing at the car expectantly. "But, yeah, no luck there." I shook my head again, this time more firmly. "Sorry, no." That's when his smile faltered. His eyes went cold, and for a second, I could see something dangerous in them. Without warning, he reached for my door. I had locked it when I got in. He yanked at it, but it wouldn't budge. He didn't stop, though. He stretched his hand through the window, trying to grab the inside door handle. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and my adrenaline kicked into overdrive. Without thinking, I slammed my foot on the clutch and shifted into first. My car, thankfully, started right up. The second I did, I floored it. The engine roared to life as I tore out of that gas station, slamming the door shut behind me as I peeled away from the pump. I glanced in my rearview mirror just as I saw him stumbling back toward his SUV. He was too late. I was already far enough away that I knew I was safe, for the moment. But I wasn't done. I wasn't going to just leave it at that. I immediately dialed the police, telling them everything. They showed up pretty quickly, and once I told them my story, they took the surveillance footage from the gas station cameras. After they reviewed the footage, they confirmed everything I had feared. Just after I left, the guy walked right back to his red SUV, got in, and drove off. He had been waiting for me to either let my guard down or make a mistake. If I hadn't locked my doors that second time, if I had rolled down the driver's side window to talk, if I had shut off my car to pump gas properly, it would have been over for me. I don't want to think about what could have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts. I got home that night, shaken but alive. I'm not sure what would have happened if I didn't lock my doors or double-check my mirrors, but I know one thing for sure. If I hadn't done everything I did in those crucial moments, I wouldn't be telling you this story. It was another lonely overnight shift at the gas station. The kind of night that drags on, with the low hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of passing vehicles outside the windows. The store was empty, except for me and the occasional car pulling in for gas. I was used to working the graveyard shift on my own, and I didn't mind it most nights. The world outside felt quiet and safe, even if the hours were long and the isolation was heavy. But tonight, something felt different. Something was off. I had been buried in invoices for the last few minutes, mindlessly typing away when I heard the bell on the door chime. A customer had entered. I glanced up to see a man, average in build, wearing dark clothes that didn't seem to match the weather. The lights from the station flickered across his face as he came in, his eyes scanning the store before they landed on me. I greeted him the way I always did. "Can I help you with anything?" He looked back at me, a polite smile on his face. "I'm just getting gas, but I need to use the bathroom," he said. "I'll be right back." I nodded and watched him walk toward the back of the store, the door to the restroom swinging shut behind him. It wasn't unusual for people to stop in during the night, especially on this main route. Most were just passing through, heading somewhere else, and I didn't think much of it. A few minutes passed. 5, maybe 7. I didn't look at the clock, but the time stretched on and on. Then the door swung open again. The man returned, looking a little more unsettled. He didn't come to the counter immediately. Instead, he lingered by the door, hesitating. "I'm having some trouble with the pump," he said, his voice casual but tinged with confusion. "You might need to come outside and help me." I was used to customers getting frustrated with the pumps, but they usually just complained about them not working properly. The fact that he wasn't angry or upset raised a small red flag. Something felt off, but I shook it off. He was just a guy getting gas at a late hour, right? He didn't look threatening. "Okay," I said, my fingers already tapping at the register to check the pump's status. But when I glanced at the screen, there was no record of the pump being used. Not even an error message. It was as if he hadn't even tried to pay yet. "Was there an issue with your payment?" I asked, my voice a little more guarded now. He shook his head, stepping a bit closer to the counter. "No, I didn't even start yet. It just doesn't make sense. Could you come help me with it? I don't really understand the machine." I hesitated. The rules were strict when it came to the overnight shift. We weren't allowed to leave the store alone. It wasn't safe. I looked at him again, trying to gauge his intentions. He didn't seem dangerous, but there was something about his insistence that set me on edge. I glanced at the clock behind me. The night was dragging. I gave him a polite but firm response. "I'm sorry, I can't leave the store during overnight shifts. It's just me here, and it's against policy. I'm not allowed to step outside." His expression didn't change much, but there was a slight shift in his demeanor, as if he didn't like that answer. "I don't understand," he said. "I just need help. I'm not scary, I promise. It's simple. Could you just come outside for a second?" His words started to feel a little too much like a plea, like he was pushing me into something I wasn't comfortable with. I stood firm. "No, I can't leave the store," I repeated, my voice steady but more insistent. "If I could go out, I would, but store policy is clear. It's not about being scared, it's just not allowed. If an old lady came in at this hour asking for help, I'd have to tell her the same thing." He was quiet for a moment, staring at me with an almost unnerving calmness. Then he slowly started to walk away from the counter. I thought that was the end of it, but as he reached the door, he stopped, turning back one last time. "Can you just come outside and show me?" he asked, his tone a little too calm, a little too repetitive. "Please, just for a second. I can't figure it out." The anxiety in my chest grew. My patience was wearing thin. I had already said no, twice. This was getting strange. Why wouldn't he just accept it? I crossed my arms, staring at him with a little more force. "Okay," I said, my voice snapping a little in frustration. "All you need to do is 1. Pick up the nozzle, 2. Select the fuel grade, and 3. Put it into your tank and squeeze the handle. That's it. I'm not going outside." For a second, he just stood there, staring at me, almost as if he was weighing my words. Finally, he turned and walked out the door. I breathed a quiet sigh of relief. But something didn't sit right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just avoided something dangerous. I watched him through the window as he made his way to the pump, where he seemed to have no trouble at all. I couldn't see his movements clearly, but from what I could tell, he was pumping gas with ease. No issues. No trouble. It was as if the whole ordeal had been a strange game. And then something caught my eye, his license plates. They looked familiar. Too familiar. It took me a moment to place them. They were from my state. I'd been so distracted by the oddity of the situation that I hadn't noticed earlier. I don't know what he was really trying to do, but whatever it was, I didn't want to find out. I've been working that shift for a long time, but tonight was different. Tonight, I learned the hard way that sometimes things don't always seem as normal as they appear. So, to the man who tried to get me outside in the middle of the night, let's never meet again. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the strange and unexpected. If you enjoyed the story, hit that like button, share with fellow curious minds, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Until next time, stay curious, stay intrigued,